The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Welcome, listeners. This is Monday evening, and thrilled to be here with you. So, folks, for those of you who have got our books, thank you, because it helps us help entrepreneurs impacted by COVID-19. And for those of you who have not got your copy yet, please make an effort to get it so together we can help out. And also, as usual, I am asking you to share 1 hour of your time every month. 1 hour of your time every month without any strings attached, because that will really help somebody out, folks. So make sure to do that. And we will invite our guest now, George.
Hello, Divya. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. How are you, George?
Just fine.
Well, fantastic. I know we had some technical difficulties, but we got our guest in, folks. So we apologize for starting the show late, and technical difficulties happen. So George, share with us, where did your life journey begin?
Would you say that again?
Yes. Where did your life journey begin?
I grew up in northern Minnesota in mining country, iron mining country. And I studied at the college and became a dentist, but I was always a science person. And I did a lot of traveling by bush plane, my own plane in northern Canada and Alaska. And I've written 5 pro-science books, 1 a bestseller. And my articles and op-eds on energy and on aviation have appeared in many national magazines. And my 5th book, because of the importance of climate change, I have decided to make my 5th book, Unintended Consequences, The Lie That Killed Millions and Accelerated Climate Change, available free to the public from my website, which is www.tundracub.com.
So what was it? So what was it like growing up in Minnesota?
Well, Minnesota, I'm in northern Minnesota. So as you might imagine, we had long winters and beautiful spring, summers, and falls. But it was a great place to grow up and get an education. And basically, that's where I got my love of science, was starting out in community college. And then in dental college, you're strong on science. And almost all my reading, although I like the classics, is science. Mm-hmm. And about 10 years ago, I heard about thorium as an alternative to uranium for nuclear power.
So, George, let's focus first on your life journey, and then we will kind of move.
Okay, very good.
Into it. Yeah.
You tell me what you want to know.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. So tell us, like, when you were a child, you mentioned about being in science. So were you curious about doing some science experiments for your projects, or how was your childhood?
Well, Over the years, I came to realize that we owe every one of our benefits to science. There is nothing really, maybe some minor things, but you wake up in the morning, you have coffee, you have a radio, you have TV, you have a car, you have communication. All of this would be gone if we did not have the science that's developed since the Enlightenment. Um, so we owe a great debt to science, and we make a huge mistake when we ignore it. For instance, when making medical decisions or when choosing how we will generate electricity, because the latter has a huge influence on the environment. And climate change demands that we must stop damaging the environment.
Right. So basically, you don't recall anything from your childhood, I guess.
Divya, I'm having a little trouble with your accent. It would help me if you talk a little slower.
Okay, I will do that. So tell me, when you were a child, did you do any science projects like any other kids?
um, did you say projects?
Science projects.
Yes. Um, Actually, I have not been directly involved in science projects, but I work every day with people who are at the top of their field in energy, in environment, and in climate change issues. And that's because I got involved with this group of scientists. They're great at writing to each other, but they're not very good at communicating with the public. That's what I'm good at. And so um, they all contributed to this book. And I have written it in such a way that the ordinary person with a high school education can easily understand it. And that's what's important because it's the ordinary people who vote. It's the regular people who get elected to Congress. It's not scientists. So it's important that people understand these issues so they can make their decisions based on the science, not what they're being told by the companies who want to profit from various other ways that are environment damaging. And in this case, I'm referring to wind and solar. Um, I'm a huge fan, as of all my colleagues, of nuclear power, which the UN and the World Health Organization rate number one for safety. And that is important. It is really something that most people do not know because in the United States, we are unique in having a vocal, dedicated, anti-nuclear crowd that operates constantly and often without principle and often without knowledge and resistance to gaining that knowledge.
So, George, can you understand me?
Say that again, please.
Can you understand me?
Yes.
Okay. So, let's have a show. So, tell us a bit about your bush pilot experience.
Oh, well, I had my parents, when I was growing up, had a little cracker box cabin on a lake in northern Minnesota. And one of my neighbors had a seaplane, and that just fascinated me. And I never dreamed that when I grew up, I could have a seaplane. But when I got out of college and got into practice and finally got my bills paid and some money in the bank, I read about a fellow who flew his Beechcraft Bonanza from Chicago to Baffin Island, no, to Churchill on Hudson Bay. And I decided I had a Bonanza. I said, he could do that, I could do that. So I went in 1967, and I'd already been all around the 48 states and the Bahamas and whatever with my Bonanza. But I'd always liked the North because I like the wilderness. So anyway, all the way up to Churchill and all the way back, that's like 900 miles. I looked down at all those lakes and I got thinking about fishing. Well, you can land a bonanza on a lake once and it's there forever. So I needed a seaplane. And so I got a float rating, bought a seaplane, and for the next 38 summers, I was somewhere in the far north, somewhere along the Arctic Ocean, exploring, sometimes living with the natives, sometimes stopping at when I needed supplies at settlements. But reading and learning about the country, its history, and nothing is better for exposing science than aviation. The whole thing is science-based. So my first book, the bestseller, was rich in science history, and it's one of the reasons it was a bestseller. And by the way, that book I have made free also from my website. People go to the homepage, they can click on the cover of the book called True North.
Wow, what a experience. So tell us about, like, have you done any fly fishing or fishing when you were out there?
Oh, yes. Not fly fishing. The fish up there are too big for fly fishing. You want to have a 20-pound test line. And I have literally on the edge of the Arctic Ocean, at the mouth of what we call the Great Whale River, but the natives call the Great Fish River. Literally in 15 minutes, caught so many fish I had to quit because my arms hurt. And standing right alongside me was an Inuit native with an old three-pointed spear, spearing trout and other fish. I can't remember the name right now. But it's been a marvelous experience. My presentations on my travels have taken me to almost every major city in the United States and Canada, and even to Australia, where I've also done some exploring.
Very nice. So what did fishing teach you?
Say that again, please.
What did fishing teach you?
What did I learn? I learned it pays to be prepared, to do your homework, to be safe, to fly safely, to not to cut corners, and be reliant. I had an engine partly fail on me when I was way out in the bush in Quebec. And because I knew a lot about engines, I was able to make remedies that allowed me to, that's a 4-cylinder engine that I had, fly it back 60 miles on 3 cylinders. And if I had not known what to do, I could not have done that. And this was in the days before GPS and satellite radio. So it was important to be well informed, know what to do if you had a problem. I learned a lot from flying, including trusting your equipment, your training, and the science that brings you there.
Absolutely. So as you flew, was there ever a time when you got lost?
Got lost? Oh, I got lost once, but believe it or not, I have never been lost in North America. I was up there when there were no navigation aids and you navigated by finger on the map all the time. But when I finally did get lost, what came as a shock to me, I was in Australia and I was a member of a group of 10 aircraft that were touring Australia. And when we left, I think it was Mildura, I'm not quite sure. I was the 7th of 10 in a row to take off from the airport. And you're supposed to follow the plane right in front of you. And the tower told me to wait because there was a plane wanted to land. Well, by the time he landed and cleared the taxiway, the plane I was supposed to follow was just about out of sight. Now, so I flew the heading I was supposed to do. And they didn't have Omni at that time there, which is a sophisticated nav aid. They had old low frequency, which we didn't have anymore in the United States. So I hope to catch up with the people who I did, but you cannot catch up to a plane that left 10 minutes before you. And so we and the two people following me in the other planes went on a course, and finally we could radio these other people, but that's no good if you can't see them. So anyway, finally we stumbled on an airport, and it happened to be the one that they told us, do not land here no matter what. And that was because it was an Aboriginal reserve. But I'm not going to go run out of gas and land somewhere else. So I landed there. And so did the people behind me. And after a while, the group leader, who knew where that was, came, picked us up, and we followed him back to the herd, which was very embarrassing for somebody who's flown all over North America with finger on the map. But that intrusion taught me, don't trust following somebody anymore. You have the heading, you know exactly where you're going. Don't rely on somebody else. And since then, I have not been lost anymore.
Oh, what a wonderful story, George. So you have talked about flying, and tell us about your experiences in Australia.
Well, my book on my travels in North America gained the interest of several major newspapers. And so on one of my flights, I took along their outdoor correspondent to the Arctic coast. And then I heard that the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association was sponsoring this tour in Australia. And since this friend of mine who, with the columnist, did such a nice job of writing it up, I thought, well, let's go to Australia and I'll invite Jim along and he can write about traveling Australia, which we did. And so that's how we happened to end up going to Australia. And I am too old to go back, but I would love to. I found it fascinating, the people friendly, the wildlife unique, and the money the same. It's great, and the lobsters are big.
So you have mentioned about the impact on coral reef. Can you tell us something a bit about that?
The coral reefs?
Yeah,
Yes.
like what is the situation? Like when did you go? What have you personally seen happen to the coral reefs
Right.
over the years?
When I was in Australia, now that was in 1975 approximately. And at that time, the oceans had warmed a little bit, and there was a little bit of die-off of the coral from, they cannot stand water that's too warm. But by now, because of ocean warming and pollution, the Great Barrier Reef of Australia, which is like 1,500 miles long, is half dead. It's half dead. And the barrier reefs, the reefs are the ocean's nurseries. And the oceans are essential to the health of the planet, including our health. And they provide 20% of our protein. And they sequester this carbon dioxide that we've been pumping into the atmosphere. But they can only take so much. And when you start to overload them, like we have done, the oceans start getting more acid, because when you add carbon dioxide to water, you get carbonic acid. And that inhibits the cell formation of all of these microorganisms, these phytoplankton that make oxygen. And those things give us 50% of our oxygen. If you enjoy breathing, you want to be serious about the ocean, because it's got to keep functioning the way it has for millions of years. But we have already changed the chemistry of the ocean. Let's say X amount. If we do that same amount more, we are hovering on the death of the oceans, and we are already in deep trouble. So we got to get serious about stopping adding carbon
Right.
dioxide to the atmosphere, but we're
So,
not.
right, right. So you mentioned about the coral reefs being the nurseries of the sea.
Yep.
So can you expand more on that?
Well, I'll have to do it in generalities because I'm not an oceanographer. And I always want to never exaggerate, never tell things that I'm not sure of. If you've seen any of the good programs on the oceans, you know that fish abound in the coral reef areas. It's shelter for small fish. It's shelter for lots of crustaceans. It's like a nursery, and as they grow up and move away, they feed other fish. They're a part of the base of the food chain. And if we disturb that food chain, we are in big trouble. As I said, we get 20% of our protein from the oceans. Just imagine losing that, let alone losing 50% of our oxygen. And by the way, it's important for people to know that since the concentration of oxygen in the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution began has already significantly dropped. It's not enough to cause a problem, but the trend is there. So these things are very serious. And one of the reasons that we're concerned about um, generating electricity is that about 20% of the carbon that gets pumped into the air happens because of generating electricity, primarily in the past by burning coal, oil, or natural gas.
Right, right. So
Nuclear
let's
power,
mention that.
however,
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
no carbon dioxide.
Right. So we don't want to explore like different we'll just kind of like shed lights rather than making definitive opinions, because like we don't have enough time to go over all the data and what is what. So let's just kind of explore different aspects. Is that okay with you, George?
Let's do what?
Okay, so a question for you as to, there are a lot of people
Yes.
who talk about climate change being a hoax. So how do you answer that?
They talk about what? I missed that.
They talk about climate change
Yeah.
being
A
a,
hoax. Okay. I got you. Well, there are people who they call COVID a hoax. They call vaccines uh, dangerous. They're science deniers. And unfortunately, they don't want to listen to the science. They don't want to do the science. They don't want to see the numbers. We offer to give these presentations to groups that resist and are sold on, for instance, wind and solar, despite their many defects, and they do not want to hear. We offer, for instance, the Sierra Club presentations. They don't reply. We offer it to the Nature Conservancy. They don't reply, not on the national level, not on the state level. They have come to the point where instead of really being in it for the environment, quite frankly, they are in it for the money because they want a membership. The membership has been convinced that nuclear is bad, wind and solar is good. And if they come out and say, hey, folks, we made a mistake, I'll give you perfect evidence of that. Bill McKibben, who got me really into environment with his great book, The End of Nature, formed a group called 350.org, which basically said if carbon dioxide percentage in the atmosphere gets beyond 350 parts per million, we're in trouble. Okay, we're at 412 now. So he was attending a big Vermont rally of his group, 350.org, and a reporter from, I think it was Rolling Stone, asked him, how can you privately support nuclear power, but you won't say so publicly? And he said, because if I did, I'd lose half my membership. Okay, what does that say? It says that his allegiance to the environment is gone. His allegiance is now to his organization. And that's terrible. It's a huge loss. He could be an ally. He admits that nuclear power is good. He understands that it's rated number one for safety, but he won't come out and say it publicly. If you watch Michael Moore's great movie, Planet of the Humans, you will see Bill McKibben run away from pointed questions on just this issue. We have a lot of people who understand that nuclear is safe, but we have more people who are kind of like the anti-vaxxers or the climate change is a hoax types who don't want to learn. They don't want to admit they were wrong. And that's a human trait. Adults, real adults say, oh, I made a mistake. Thank you for correcting me. But that's very hard for many people to do, especially if they refuse to just read this simple book that's image rich and is written for anybody with a high school education and is from experts. Dr. James Hansen, former head of climate science at NASA, the people who put the man on the moon, praises my writing, saying it is brilliant. I may want to quote some of the material or borrow, I think he said. So, and there are other people respected at the top of their professions recommending the book. That's why I have made it free on the web. And if people will just educate themselves, when they do, they say, oh, the people that will do it and read it, they tell me, oh, I wish I'd known that sooner. Let me tell you one more thing. It's important for people to understand how our fear of nuclear power or radiation began. It began almost 100 years ago in the 20s when a guy named Herman Muller exposed fruit flies to massive doses of radiation. Let me tell you how big. It's like having 1,000 mammograms in 3 minutes. That's immense. And of course, he got mutations on these poor little flies. And he called it a low dose. Back 100 years ago, we didn't know much about this stuff. We didn't know that our bodies have automatic repair mechanisms that can easily repair any damage from radiation from any source unless it's extreme. We didn't know that we get more DNA breaks from the oxidation of the food we eat than we do from radiation all around us, from the sun, from your granite countertop,
Right.
from your smoke detector.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all the information. Where can our listeners reach out to you if they're interested?
Yeah, you got to give me that again.
Where can the listeners reach out if they want to connect with you?
They can go to my website and download this book. It's all there. And that isn't the only place. There are organizations that are similarly pro-nuclear and anti-wind and solar because they are horribly inefficient.
Right.
And they are environment wreckers.
Sure. Well, thank you for sharing your website. Can you share what's your website?
You're welcome.
Okay. Can you share what is your website?
My website is with the W's, tundrakub.com. TUNDRA, the word tundra, cub like bear cub.com, tundracub.com. And all people have to do is click on the image of the book and they can download it free.
Okay. Well, thank you, George, for joining us. And we wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry with my problem. I have a little high frequency loss. And so between the high pitched voice and your accent, it gives me, if you spoke Norwegian, no, I can't even do that. But that's my background. And
it's okay. It's completely fine. No worries.
All right. Well, I want to thank you. You're doing a good service. You are probably doing more than most people just by helping me disseminate this information. And I encourage everyone, my email address is on the website. They have questions, I will answer them. If I cannot answer them, I will connect them to a person who can. Now, 95% of the time, I can answer them fine with confidence. But when I can't, I like to turn to the people whose business that is and let the experts answer.
Well, wonderful. Thank you. And thank you, listeners, for joining us. We will connect with you next week. And thank you, Rebel, for
all right,
supporting us. Okay.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who've experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week, Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time.